rather be in here than over there.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I don't blame you.
We should move in here, but we should come over there. Facilities might be.
There's plenty of good room, everybody. We can come in and if you want to just sort of like sit someplace where you can be seen, that's great. You can stay at the tables. We can move out some chairs over here this way. Rosetta's sitting in the comfortable chair I see over there.
Super comfy.
But it's okay.
She looks super comfy. She might fall asleep there.
We do exercise in here too.
Yeah, I know.
We do exercise in this room. Nice room.
Yeah, it is. There.
There is one extra slice of cake. I already had a
Does anybody
piece,
want
so
a
if
piece?
anybody has not had a slice of cake, would like one, there's one right here.
Anybody want a piece of cake? There we go.
All right, today is a more freewheeling conversation. Hey, Jim, good to see you. And it's the sort of ultimate, in the Greek sense, class of me being here. So what I thought, because we, thanks to Rosetta, we took our 3-week Mark class, and Rosetta said, hey, that was supposed to be 4 weeks. So we got an extra day, but I thought, well, we already did the 3 weeks in Mark, and we sort of, tied that up in a bow. Not that you couldn't have spent like many more weeks on the Gospel of Mark. So I thought, well, why don't we just have a day where we do sort of like burning questions about the Bible. Randy already is told me that he's loaded for bear, and but again, I am not promising that I will have the air quotes answer to everything. It may be something that we all can talk about and in a place of just asking the question. Or it may be one where you're asking something and I'm going to say, I don't know. I never thought about that, or I don't have the answer to that. So that's all okay. If you read my book, you might have read that portion of it where I had my own conversion about that sort of thing when I was a graduate student.
It was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago.
Way back then.
Yes.
But we're not counting.
Where I had a woman in my class who asked me a question that I didn't have an answer for, so I made it up. What I didn't know about this particular student is that she had a propensity to want to gotcha her instructors, and so the next week she came back and speaking about being loaded for bear, she promptly told me how my answer was incorrect that I had given her the week before, and afterwards I felt so completely embarrassed, and driving home I was like, what an idiot, you should be doing this, you're, blah, 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 all the tapes, so I gave that up for Lent and never picked it up again. So if I don't know, I'm going to tell you I don't know, and because I don't know everything, and maybe somebody else knows. So that's the wisdom of a group. So anybody want to start out? Yeah, Chris.
The number 40, is there any significance in the Bible? Because as you're reading through, I cannot remember all the 40s that mentioned, but I can remember that in the Genesis, when Noah entered the ark,
Yes.
the heaven floodgate opened, they reigned 40 days, 30 nights, right? And the Israelites in Exodus, they stay in the desert for 40 years.
40 years.
And after Jesus' baptism, he was
40
to
days.
the mountain
Right.
for 40 days to be tempted by the devil. And I'm sure there are other 40, but I
Yes,
cannot
yes,
remember
yes.
more.
But did that work?
that,
Is that 40 any?
yeah, it's obviously, it's a biblical trope, right? Like, it's used in the Bible again and again. And when, for example, as you say, when Jesus uses it, 40 days and 40 nights, when the biblical writers, the gospel writers, use that of Jesus being in the wilderness, they're referring back to those other times when 40 is used, particularly the 40 years in the wilderness, because he's 40 days in the wilderness too. But the number 40 itself, I am not quite sure of what it is. I'm quite sure, though, that it probably has some sort of biblical resonance in terms of, for example, 7, which appears in the Bible a lot too. 7 is the number of completeness, because if you look at the days of creation, right, there's the 6 days of creation and the 7th day of God's rest. So that in the Bible is always a number that represents completeness. I don't recall offhand what the number 40 per se has any sort of connotation, except for the fact that it is a recurring trope, as you suggest, throughout the Bible. And the more you get into the biblical story, the more it's being used to refer back to previous stories. For example, Jesus in the wilderness, the 40 days and 40 nights is a clear reference back to the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, because Jesus is in the desert, people of Israel were in the desert. That's about.
And now what you said.
Say it again?
There's 40 days and 40 nights with no flood or no
Rain.
Yes, right.
They needed to build the ark with animals on the ark. They never needed. Because there's no having ark. All these animals. No.
And Noah had an ark, right?
Oh, yes.
All these animals on one ark. Did he?
40 pairs of animals.
Oh, well, no, he had more than 40 pairs of animals. If we were to take the story literally, there wouldn't be room for all those animals. But yes, there's probably more than 40 species of creatures.
2 of each.
2 of each. That's right. And then there were more of the clean than unclean. But yes, I mean, I guess that I'm not sure exactly if the number 40 itself has a connotation like 7 does. Yeah. But clearly, it's meant to indicate in both cases, in the 40 days and 40 nights, 40 years of wandering, a lot of time, right? That is trying to be conveyed. So maybe that's just what it is. It just indicates a long time. But we could look that up probably and find out.
Okay, so what I wanted to bring up was the gospel from a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, yes.
Matthew writes, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth.
Mm-hmm.
I have not come to bring peace, but a sword.
Yes.
For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against his mother, daughter-in-law
against a daughter-in-law,
mother-in-law, and one's foes will be members of one's own household."
What?
This seems so out of character.
Seems like doesn't seem like Jesus, right?
That was going to
They love it because it explains their family schism because they're so documented.
That's okay. I did not know whether that was the banner that they carry to, in their crusades and so forth. But that was the second part of my question. But first, I want to know what.
Yeah. Why is Jesus saying that? What does he mean by
what
that?
Does Matthew
Right.
have? And does that type of a fiery language exist in any of the other gospels? And just what is it about?
What chapter was that? What chapter was that again?
Okay, it was. I just kept the bulletin. Matthew 10.
Matthew 10. Thanks.
Verse 24 to 39. But like I said, I did the easy thing was that the bulletin from
Right. Well, what's Matthew doing here? Right, he's setting up the disciples for the future.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And let's look at this gospel in its own context. First of all, this is a gospel that is written primarily to a Jewish community. Matthew's writing to a Jewish audience. That's his sort of his target audience, let's say. Many of the elements within the gospel indicate that, right? He's one of the gospel writers who refers back to the Hebrew Bible most often. He tries to show Jesus as the son of Abraham, the son of David, in his etymology, or his genealogy of Jesus at the beginning, etc. Right. So this is a Jewish community who is in the midst of Jewish Christian community, who's in the midst of a larger Jewish community, who's not accepting Jesus as Messiah. A lot of other folks are not accepting him. Those family members, for example, who aren't accepting him, and so they are experiencing the sense of rejection. And so Jesus, at least through the words of Matthew, is saying, that's going to happen. And he pays your money and he takes your choice. You're either going to be my disciple or you're not going to be my disciple. And if you are, it's going to cost you something.
But even to the point of it not being peace on earth.
Well, see, this is Jesus the rabbi who I think is using rhetoric. And what does it mean? What is the sword that he's talking about in the context of that? Let's see where that comes, right? He says,
I have not come to bring peace, but a sword.
what verse is that again? That is, oh, you don't have it there. Yes, okay. Do not think I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against his mother, and a daughter-in-law against the mother-in-law. So, I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. And what's that sword going to do? It's the sword that's going to cut between family relations. It's not a literal sword, perhaps, but a sword that's going to mean that you're going to be separated. You're going to be cut off from, if you follow me, the chances are, or one of the options is going to be that you're not going to be accepted by your mother or your father or your sister or your brother or your mother.
So this was not in the context of the Roman occupation.
No, I don't think so. I mean, because we can see many places throughout the Gospel of Matthew where he's not saying that, right?
This seems
Yeah.
contrary.
Yeah,
So many
exactly.
others
Yeah. I think he's using that term of sword in a metaphorical sense to talk about the division that following him is going to cause.
I prefer fence to sword. I mean,
Yeah.
it's less
Well,
but yeah, I get it.
Take it up with Jesus.
Later.
And is it true that evangelicals use this passage in justification?
Well, it could be. I mean, I'm not up on some of that in the far right evangelical circles where they say that that's for like use of guns and violence and all that sort of thing.
No, I think it's used more like as a justification for, well, your kids aren't following Jesus, and this is what is expected, kind of. And it is used as a rationalization for the schisms in families.
Yes, okay, yeah.
Rejection of, it sort of rationalizes the continuation of evangelic activity with one's children, even though it's clear they're going to follow. They're not interested. And
Well, so here's the thing with that. That doesn't make sense to me in some ways, because I'm not sure that's what Jesus is saying. I think that clearly think that Jesus is not talking about cutting off somebody else, but they're going to cut you off, right? Because the Jewish followers of Jesus still thought of themselves as Jews. Some of the other Jews refused to accept that the followers of Jesus were still Jews. Right? And especially after the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, that sense of trying to maintain group identity was very highly worked on, let's say, among the rising rabbinic Judaism at the end of the first century, beginning of the second century. And in fact, into the second century, there were actually blessings put into the synagogue service that anathematized Christians. Like if basically saying, if any of you here in this congregation today are followers of Jesus, a curse be on you and get the heck out. So I think, and if you experience that, and this, say for example, here we're here at St. Stephen's, and I don't know that the new thing is, you're going to be following a Martian. I don't know. The Martian followers are going to say, we're followers of the Martian, and everybody else is going to say, are you nuts? If you're not, that's not the way we believe. Cutting them off from the rest of the synagogue, right? So, and so if you think of like your whole family and community are here and part of that, right? And to feel like you're no longer welcome is a big deal, right?
Yeah, I get it, but it's just another one of 100,000 examples of Bible taken out of context.
Yes, okay. What you're saying is about that certain evangelical folk will use this, especially I've heard it used in terms of sort of gay and lesbian children, for example, right? Is one of the big examples.
Sure.
That they're going to cut their children off because they're gay and lesbian. Well, I don't see Jesus of the Gospel of Matthew even doing that. The Jesus of the Gospel of Matthew, if we look at when Matthew is called, the tax collector Matthew, Jesus goes that very night and has dinner at his house. And all of the righteous people say, what is your master doing eating with tax collectors and sinners?
Well, it's so like the thing that we welcome watches is
Yeah.
And yes. I mean, I think it's less about Jesus saying, cut yourself off from them, as saying, if you're a follower of mine, you may get cut off from other people. That might happen to you. If you're truly following the gospel, it might get uncomfortable. And in fact, some cases you might even suffer. In some cases, you might even die for it. That's what he's saying. And I really don't think that he's saying use the sword, because we know that he doesn't say that, right? He talks about not doing that, not being a zealot. So you can't just use the one verse. This is again to the proof texting, that is using one verse of scripture to make to spin a whole argument out of whole cloth, right?
My question was, it seemed to be out of it seemed to be incongruous.
Yeah, try to read that verse in the context of both the chapter and then also in the context of the whole of Jesus' ministry, and in the world behind the text. That is, what's the world of Matthew that is at play here, right? Yeah. Perplexed, Jonathan?
Well, I mean, there's some contradictory stuff floating out there, right? We get, if your enemy offends you, turn the other cheek to them, but then we also have the same guy making a whip and beating the hell out of the money changers and the merchants in the temple. Right? They certainly offended him, and it wasn't enough to just say, like, okay, maybe you could sit up and say. you know. And instead he physically attacked, so it's complicated.
I don't agree with that, Richard. I think that the whip scared the animals away. It dispelled the animals from what was supposed to be.
I was going to look and see if Matthew has that.
You don't think he hit
No.
anybody? Was he scared them?
I just understood it as, there's too much chaos and you're making a circus out of something that's supposed to be sacred and the whip
Well,
scared
that's.
the animals away. It doesn't hurt. It's in, yeah, he overturned things, but I don't remember him.
He got into good trouble, as some folks said, right? So remember what we said at the last week of Mark's gospel a couple of weeks ago, where this is sort of an act of civil disobedience. What had just happened around that time was that they just allowed, it was a brand new thing to allow the selling of animals and the changing of coins right within the temple precincts. That had not been the case before. And so it seems that Jesus is saying, no, that's not going to happen here. We're not going to do that. We're going to act up. And he causes the scuffle. N.T. Wright, a New Testament scholar, says that by that, the action that he did there, by overturning the tables of the money changers, messing up the where the animals were and everything, he temporarily stopped the sacrificial system that was operating in this way, so that he's doing an act of protest. That, of course, it's going to come up again. They're going to, put the tables right again. They're going to start the operations. But he does this action of civil disobedience or religious disobedience to make a prophetic point that this is not the way that things ought to be. And the religious elites are making a lot of money on this as well. You remember in Mark's gospel where he has the woman with the 2 coins, right? That she gives all that she had to live on. And it's not just that she's, the object of a good stewardship sermon, but she's giving everything she has, thinking that she has to do that, right, to be pleasing to God. And Jesus, remember, walks out of the temple after that, never goes back again. And all the the disciples are saying, oh, look at all these beautiful buildings and everything. And he's saying, don't get caught up on that, because all this is going to be destroyed. Not one stone will be left upon another, because the whole thing is rotten to the core, and it's all going to come crashing down.
Yeah, I think Jonathan might have been pointing out a potential discrepancy between being violent, make a point, versus being cheap. Is that?
Well, I mean, I guess there's some disagreement about what they mean in Gospel John.
Oh, you're talking about the John version of that. Okay.
Because that's the only one where you talk about his particular method, right?
And interestingly, that also, by the way, is in John chapter 2, verses at the end of the gospel. It's the only gospel where this happens at the beginning.
Before the
Right.
entry into because he's not hung up on timeline.
Right.
It's all sort of eternal, I guess. But yeah, the idea of he makes a scourge of small cords and drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and the ox. You think that's just scourging the animal?
Well, what's he say? He says, making a whip of cords, he drove all of them out of the temple. The referent of that sentence is both the sheep and the cattle.
Well,
right?
I mean, is it and found in the temple those that sold oxen and sheep and dogs and the changers of money to them? When he had made a scourge of small cords, he drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen, before that changes money and overthrew it.
Uh-huh. Well, okay, he's obviously angry, and he's obviously like making a case, and he's done, and he's,
Maybe in your original text, there's hints from how the language is constructed, like what sometimes pronouns are.
well, but okay, so even so, right? I mean, let's take the
I don't think these people would just leave because he's like, I think what you're doing is wrong.
right. So he's saying, get out of here, right? Yeah. He's really angry, and his zeal for your house has eaten me up.
Right.
He says, zeal for your house has eaten me up. The scorn of those who scorn you has fallen upon me. He's, my Father's house was meant to be a house of prayer for all people. You've turned it into a den of thieves. That is, remember what you had to do. You had to sell your Roman coins. You had to exchange them for temple coins because you couldn't have temple coins. Well, first of all, you have the Roman coins now in temple precincts because you're exchanging them right there. But
Get your Disney funding.
yes, you're not supposed to have the regular currency. You only are supposed to have this special currency that doesn't have any Roman images on it. And so when you exchange money, you're not just going to do one-for-one exchange. You're going to be taking a surcharge on the exchange rate, right? So I mean, all of that is what he's now. The other thing too is that maybe something would be helpful here in this regard. Remember, there's different groups of different factions of the Judaism of the first century, what's called late Temple Judaism. There's the Pharisees, of which Jesus is actually affiliated, right? Even though he critiques them a lot, he's more like a Pharisee.
Rabbi.
Right, he's a rabbi. He speaks a lot, just like the Rabbi Hillel, for example, So he's more aligned with the Pharisees than anybody else. That's why he's so critical of it. But the Pharisees aren't the people in charge. The people in charge are the Sadducees. These are the people who are linked to the Romans, who are in charge of the temple cult. They are the 1% of Jewish society, very wealthy, and again, linked to Rome. They're the folks who are in charge of all the stuff going on in the temple. So he is, if he has any zealotry, it's zealotry about pure religion, just like the prophets of Israel, like Jeremiah, for example, right? Who Jesus seems to act like an awful lot in the Gospels, and he's being zealous for the law, and zealous for the true working out of his own faith that he feels and his fellow Jews of his ilk feel is being countermined by the Sadducees, by the temple elites, and so he feels that they have sold their religion out to the highest bidder. Now, and also the Sadducees got there. They weren't really part of the actual priestly class. They sort of bought their way into that a couple of generations before, during the Hasmonean dynasty, and so that is why the other group of Jews, the Essenes, wouldn't even participate in the temple. They believed that all of that was just so corrupt that they would never even go to the temple. They said there's going to be another temple someday, and that's the one that we're preparing for. So they had their own religious rites. They didn't do animal sacrifices, but they had their own religious rites, their own sort of purification rites that they would use, and They never went to the temple. They didn't participate in all of that. They believed it was so corrupt that you shouldn't be part of it. So, well, that's some folks suggest that he might have spent time with the Essenes, right? Because some of what he says sounds kind of like the Essenes, and so he might have spent time with them. Nobody really knows that. That's all pure conjecture, right? And the Essenes didn't just live at Qumran or out in the wilderness like that. There were some groups of Essenes that lived in Jerusalem, actually. But they didn't participate in the temple cult at all. They did their own sort of worship on their own because they thought it was totally, as I said, totally corrupt, and they didn't participate in it. Jesus here is not going that far, but is saying, you folks who are in charge of all this, get rid of all this, because this is like not what's supposed to be going on here. And rather than being an entry and in a way to enter the presence of God, it was a barrier. And that's what Jesus seems to be doing here. Is he angry? Yes. Is he somewhat violent in doing that? Could very well be. But it's the element that maybe we just need to, if we don't like that, we need to struggle with it maybe, right? Because we know there's other elements that what he's really trying to do is he is the Prince of Peace. He is the one who comes humble and riding on a donkey as he enters the city. He is the one who will not take up the sword to fight Rome. He is not a zealot. He predicts that those who are going to be zealots and going to try to overthrow Rome by force of arms are the very ones who are going to cause its own destruction, which actually happens a generation or so later in the Jewish War in the 60s. So he's not saying that. He's not saying take up arms and attack Rome. He's not saying that because he says exactly the opposite. But doesn't mean that he's not angry, and it doesn't mean that he's not trying to cause trouble. But he would think it was good trouble, though. He would say probably. And if you're still struggling with that, good. Keep struggling. Yeah. That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, listen.
I don't know if my Bible, but it says in the Bible, nobody's coming to Jesus, right? So how are we to take that? I mean, I know that, does that mean that everybody else is gonna burn in hell or whatever? Or does it simply mean that, sort of like, if you follow my word, which is do this, do that, whatever the list of people are, because I know people like Thomas Merton was meeting with Buddhists, and when he died in Thailand, and Tutu was with Dalai Lama, and there was this interfaith exchange. But what is the Christian view on people who are not Christian?
You're talking about the 14th chapter of John, where Jesus, his farewell address, basically. It's called the Last Supper Discourse. Do not let your hearts be troubled, for 14, starting at verse 1. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house, there are many dwelling places. If it were not so, I would have told you. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, so that where I am, you may be also. And you know the way to the place where I am going. Thomas said to him, Lord, we do not know where you are going. How can we know the way? Jesus said to him, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you know me, you will know my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him.
Wasn't he betrayed? Last time he was betrayed, right?
Say that again?
Wasn't he betrayed? Last time he was betrayed. The guy found him being king of Jews, and they say he wasn't. Remember?
Yes.
Remember, they lie down, and then they just kill on the cross, let them go. Right.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And then the Bible said, you know,
Uh-huh.
does that make sense?
Yeah. So what you're asking though is about the broader sense, right? Yeah. First of all, I would answer that if the way you framed that in the first part of it, no, that is not true. That anybody who doesn't, isn't explicitly a Christian is going to hell. I think that to say that would make God into sort of like a monster, kind of, right? And I would hope that that's not how we view God. Jesus, remember what Jesus is talking about here? He's talking in a very particular context. He's talking only to his disciples, right? He's talking about his way, his way of life. That if we were to translate this Greek into Hebrew, would be halakha, which is the word that Jews use for the law. And so he's saying, I am the halakha, I am the way, I am the law. Follow me, follow my living way, and that's how you're going to get to the Father, right? I am the way to the truth, maybe, and following me is the truth. And following, if you follow in this way, it will be life for you, right? It'll be life-giving. So the object of this is life-giving, not death-giving, right? And so if folks are using this again to prove text, to say, see, it says right here in John 14 that anybody who's not a Christian is going to hell. Well, it does. I don't think it says that there is, does it?
I don't think so.
My Bible doesn't say that. Maybe you have a different version who says that, right? Not you. I'm saying, but the folks who are saying that, right?
But I am the way.
Yeah,
No one comes to the Father.
no one comes to the Father but by me. Now, that does not mean, this is again, I've said before, I'm a universalist in this regard. It seems to me that the only people who aren't going to be part of that wonderful new creation at the end of time that we say every Sunday in the Creed, that we believe in the life of the world to come, are going to be the ones who include themselves out, as Merkatz used to say. The story in Luke's Gospel of the prodigal son. The father comes and sees the son who has squandered everything and come back, with nothing to his father. Maybe you'll take me in as a slave in your household. And the father doesn't even listen to those words. He puts a ring on his finger and shoes on his feet and gives him the beautiful robe and says, kill the fatted calf because the son of mine was lost and now is found. And everybody starts rejoicing. But the elder brother was far away. And he came in and he says, what's going on? Well, your brother has come home and your father's killed the fatted calf and everybody's having a party.
Well, that's right.
And then the father says and he will not go in, right? And the father comes out to him and says, son, everything that I have is yours. You've always been with me. But we had to rejoice because this son of yours, or this brother of yours, has been lost and now it's found. But the son won't even acknowledge him as his brother. He says, this son of yours squandered everything you had on. So if anybody's not going to be part of that kingdom, and part of that party in the great getting up morning, is going to be those who will not go in by their own volition. If that's who's invited, I'm not going.
Why is that?
But I don't, because still, what would you do then with people who are not, even they're atheists or something, but they're good people and they do great deeds in the world, and win, let's say, the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that the work of Jesus on the cross and in his descent among the dead and his resurrection was the work that achieved the new creation for the globe, for everyone, for all people. And there are some of us who recognize that and celebrate it and work for that and create signs of that new creation by the way we live, hopefully, right?
That's what I'm saying.
And that's what it means to be salt of the earth and light to the world. Right. It's we are the priests, let's say, of the new creation. But that doesn't mean that other people are left out of it. Now, do I believe that Jesus Christ not only died on the cross of Calvary, but that he rose again in history? Yes, I totally believe that that happened. I believe it is a historical fact. It is a literal fact. It is not a a myth or a metaphor. And because I believe that is in fact then the way in which all people will enter into the life of God. Now, they may not believe that, and they may have other paths to that, but I think that at the end of time, we're going to be surprised about a lot of stuff too, I'm quite sure, in our hubris, right? That we think we got it all together. But I think that if in fact Jesus Christ has risen from the dead, if that is something that we believe, that is an event in history that makes all the difference. And even if folks may not believe that now, that I think we all will come to that knowledge here and even folks who are living their own way and don't believe in anything, right? Will come to know that the thing that
After physical death?
yes.
Okay, fine. I just wanted
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the book of Revelation, that it says, that they will look on him whom they have pierced, and they will, and some folks will be deeply wailing. There's a wonderful Methodist hymn that we sing actually in Advent, deeply wailing, when the true Messiah see. And that's not about about guilt, I don't think, about oh my goodness, I'm gonna get fried now. It's about oh my gosh, now that I see it, why didn't I be more of who I could have been? And why didn't I participate in this life more? And I'm so disappointed that I didn't. I think that's the deeply wailing part. Go
A
ahead.
related question, where does the idea of hellfire and damnation come from?
Darned if I know, because it's not really in the Bible that much. But we like it, right? And I think that not we personally, perhaps, but we humans kind of like it. We kind of like to be tribalist and thinking, oh, our tribe is, and if anybody's not part of our tribe, they're just going to get fried, right? They're going to get zapped like a mosquito in a mosquito trap. Many dwelling places, right? Yeah, I mean, we say many mansions in King James. You can expand that in a lot of ways too. Well, for one place, the one dwelling place is right here inside of us, right? And he's preparing a place inside of you for his presence to be there. That's one place. Another place is that I think it's the sense of at the end of time, there'll be plenty good room, as the old gospel spiritual says, for everybody, especially folks who you would never expect to be there, right? Plenty good room. And it's a great big table. And think of, your maybe your grandmother's house, and there's always room for somebody else at the table. And come on in. And those are the dwelling places. There are many dwelling places. If it were not so, what I told you, I go to prepare a place for you. So it's not only in the future. It's right now that Jesus, in a sense, is preparing a dwelling place for himself within us, right? That the more that we invite him into our hearts and our lives, the more he transforms and makes that dwelling place, so that we more fully reflect who he is into the world by the way we live and who we are. So I think that's what that means. Yeah, I mean, anybody else might have some other ideas on that.
That was, I think Jesus as the, as we understood evangelism, which is an imperfect understanding historically, but I think it was more of a Buddhist than we give him credit for being.
Say more. How do you feel that way?
He really is God inside us, as well as the God out there sitting on the throne in heaven.
Mhm.
I just think that that was really too far away from Judaism.
Hmm.
And with all emphasis on the light, all these things. I mean, this is not an original song.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. I realize that. Yeah.
Yeah. But, and I think in some ways there is quite consistent upwards.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if we were to look at some of the various religious expressions that have been part of human experience, Buddhism being one, perhaps, others, maybe, I mean, clearly Islam as another Abrahamic faith, Judaism,
Some aspects of Judaism.
Hinduism, I mean, I don't think we Westerners understand Hinduism well enough to make any comments about it. At least I don't. But we see that the Holy Spirit is at work, as we would say the language we would use for that, right? That the Spirit is shed abroad into the world, into the whole world, and is at work. And the more we try to control it, or her, the more the Spirit escapes us, right? And oops, no, don't go over there. No. Oh, but there she is. There she is. This is apropos of it is apropos of your question, but maybe like too far away from it. But I'll say it, share it anyways. I once had the privilege of seeing a Native American dance, liturgical dance, I guess you could call it, within the African American tradition, or not African American, sorry, Native American tradition. Excuse me. And part of the dance required it was all guys, and they were dancing like in sort of a not only just a circle, but like a sort of a grapevine kind of a thing. But on the periphery, there was one woman, and she was the only one dressed all in white. And she had a feather, kind of like a feather fan. And I'm probably not describing this in any way that's probably, I'm trying to be as respectful because I just don't know the words to use, right? But she was like weaving in and out of these guys, and nobody seemed to see her or recognize her, right? And I thought, oh my gosh, that's the best theology of the Holy Spirit I have ever heard, because here's this being done dramatically and in the form of a dance, in a sense, a liturgical dance, as I said. But it's sort of like, the Holy Spirit's just at work where we don't know, and inspiring all kinds of stuff that we might not know where the Spirit is going and what the Spirit's doing and where it's going to show up next. That's exactly, that to me seemed like, oh wow, yeah, I can get that, and so that's the thing. Over here, you'll see something, and it might not be overtly Christian at all. Greta Thunberg is a prophetess. I don't know if she has Christian faith at all, but she's a prophetess. And we see it here and there and there and there. And we see it in various of the world's religious traditions, perhaps, showing up.
Individuals who may or may not be Christian.
But yeah, I mean, to squelch the spirit saying it's ours or can only happen among us, and especially if Italians say that, we're totally nuts, because that's not true at all, in terms of the Christian church generally. Well, because we are often called the frozen chosen, right?
Oh.
But yeah, but the Holy Spirit's at work all over the place, and where we least expect the Spirit to be. And so just keep your eyes open and rejoice. You know, he says, some of the disciples say, "Oh, we saw somebody casting out demons in your name, and we told them to shut up." And Jesus said, "Well, if they're not for us, if they're not against us, they're for us, right?" Let it happen.
I forget where it is, but in a couple of the Gospels, isn't there a place where Jesus starts saying, like, those that say, "Lord, Lord," but don't follow the will of my Father will not, you know, but those that do, you know, are like, and maybe it's the part with the building on sand or not, but I always, after the passage you pointed out, I had trouble with and met some people that took it the very moving way. Those other passages, I felt like that was Jesus saying, it's not that you have to say, you know, these words that you know, make this proclamation that you believe in me in this way, like some various groups that you have to do, but how you live and you know, whether you follow the spirit of what I'm teaching, which I think is what you're saying. So I don't know, would you, those passages, I can't remember exactly where they are, but could be used to say, you know, here we have Jesus in his own words saying basically that, or I'm not trying to keep out people, which, you know,
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think you know, you see that parable, for example, another parable where the Pharisee comes into the temple and saying, you know, I do all this wonderful stuff, and thank God I do all this wonderful stuff, and thank God I'm not like that guy over there, the one who's that miserable sinner over there, because you know, I do all these wonderful things, and the miserable sinner is in the background, just beating his breast, saying, "Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner." You know, is understands the how he's fallen short of who he ought to be, and Jesus says that's the one who gets it, who is on the way, who's on the path, right? That I will say though, you know, that I mean, clearly there are people who are not expressly Christians who do the works of Jesus far better than I do, and I know that for sure. Just that's an empirical fact, right? And maybe you could say the same thing. I don't know, but I will say though that does not necessarily mean that we don't give voice to the truth that is in us, right? That we don't say, you know, for me, I've met the risen Jesus, and this is what gives me spiritual life, you know, and especially if there's somebody who does these things, or maybe they're an atheist, or maybe they're an agnostic, or maybe they're a seeker, or whatever, they might just be like, it's true, I'm interested in that. You know? Allow yourself to be an evangelist, right? To not just say, oh, well, they have their own religion. Well, maybe, yeah, but you can speak the truth that is in you as well, right, to folks, and to share that. Especially if you meet somebody who is just sort of wandering around or in some sort of need, or doesn't know, where their life is going, or whatever it might be, to say, let me introduce you to in John's Gospel, that disciples go and find their friends and bring them back to Jesus, right? Let me introduce you to Jesus. That's I'm showing my inner evangelical. Like that. And by the way, I consider I have refused to give up the name evangelical for myself, because I will not let that wonderful word be stolen by the far right.
We call them Lutheran.
What?
Evangelical.
Evangelical Lutherans, right?
Yeah.
I've heard most of the same.
I feel a church in Rhode Island that you said.
Wow,
Interesting.
I've never heard of that one. That's a different flavor. It's like cran raspberry. Yeah, Jeff. What do you want?
Maybe talking about this, the station, so forgive me if I'm fatigued, so I'm very interested and I'm a little jealous of you. You say that you've met the risen Jesus. And I'm a lawyer.
Describe, On what day, sir, did you meet this? Where was he at? And what time of day was it?
But here's,
Yeah.
I mean, if you're.
I can-
comfortable with talking,
Yeah, sure.
You brought it up, so
No, absolutely. I continually am meeting him. I will say that because I believe that I have an ongoing relationship with Jesus, and that's that doesn't mean that I should be committed to the next mental institution or whatever, because I'm fancifully talking about my imaginary friend. But I'll start with the most mundane examples, right, and go from there. In my daily prayer time, I continue to have encounters with Jesus at various times. Most days, just like an AA meeting, I just show up. But other than that, I'm surprised sometimes when all of a sudden there's something that I read in one of these stories, and it's like, oh, yeah, kind of like when the risen Jesus meets the disciple, it's a flash and he's gone, like on the road to Emmaus. The two were walking with him all along and didn't know it was him all along. And then they invite him into a meal, and then he breaks bread with them, and their eyes are open. And as soon as their eyes are open, he's not there anymore. It's a flash, right? So sometimes for me, that's where I meet him, right? There have been times in my life where I've had an experience where I've told this wonderful story in this group before about the feeding of the 5,000 that I experienced. It wasn't necessarily 5,000, but I was saying that when we got this little gift to our food pantry to feed the 300 people who were coming the next day to the food pantry, and it was like this little box of vegetables from Demonstration Garden from the University of Southern California that they said, oh, can you use this for your food pantry? I'm thinking that it's going to be like enough to feed people, and I literally say, what is so little among so many, which is what the apostle said in the feeding of the 5,000. And then moments later, the phone call rings, and I have somebody from our diocesan food program saying, oh, we have all this food that's just come in. Could you use it? And they show up, and it's boxes and boxes and boxes, more than we could use. There were leftovers. And And I literally sensed the presence of the risen Jesus saying, try me next time. If you don't believe it, try me.
I'm sorry, you heard those words?
Yeah, in my mind's eye. I mean, but yeah. I mean, it wasn't like the heavens opened or the, you know, and you know, I also in my book I talk about the first time I had a major experience like that was when I was in a teenager, and this woman was telling me about, you know, if I wanted to receive Jesus as my Savior, and sure, sure, okay, why not? And it was a surprise to me that I did in fact have an experience of the presence of Jesus, and so again, it's not as if these things are like the heavens open. It's not like St. Paul on the road to Damascus, where he hears this voice of Jesus and he's knocked down and he goes blind temporarily, and then he's his eyes are opened and all this. Sort of, some people have those kinds of experiences. I've not had that, and I can tell you about other things. Perhaps I won't belabor the point, but I think you're getting what I'm trying to say, that there have been times in my life where I've had these significant experiences, and the more mundane ones as well. Sometimes I'll go to communion, and it's as if, I really am experiencing the presence of Jesus in that sacrament. Right? A lot of times not, but I still show up, right? And as a priest at the altar during the consecration, often I will say, I have the experience of what I was ordained to be, and that is alter Christus, that is another Christ, in presenting to you the sacrament. When I say those words of institution and I look into that chalice, it's almost as if, that I'm speaking his words, not mine.
You get feedback?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really hard to grasp the thing is not, it's an experiential process.
Yeah.
Did you ever read Anne Lamott?
Yes. Oh, yes. I love Anne Lamott.
About when she first heard Jesus, she was brought up liberal, intellectual, and she said, I would rather die. And then slowly she said it was like a straight tap. I put a little milk down, I opened the door a little, and the next time she said, pretty soon, I'm living in my bed and doing this on my
Yeah.
And Brunswick by the civil rights songs that they sang.
Yeah.
It's really fiction.
Yeah, but it was faith just coming from the back door and letting it little by little.
Mhm.
What was the name of the person?
Anne Lamott.
Anne Lamott.
Yeah, she was a drug addict and an alcoholic.
She's written several books, and most of them are more like based in her own biography, right? But out of that, she yeah.
Fun of the memoir.
Yeah.
Very, very popular.
Right. For 3 prayers, tell thanks. Wow.
Yes, that's wonderful.
I just want to say something. This is what I feel is missing in our community. I need this. I mean, I love the upstairs and I love what we do and all that, but I think we need less of that, more of it. Because this is a community where our questions are being answered, where I feel your God in you lots of hymns and well, music. But this is what I think the church is.
Well, articulate that, I mean, to talk about that, say that,
Well, but I mean, question things first. And also, I want to hear what other people face coming into their lives.
Yes.
Like where it came to me, how it came to you. Like I've come back to church because I did hear Jesus talking to me. I feel like the miracles, and I never believed in miracles, but in my life, I've started to see them and believe. And I feel like it's hearing each other, not just somebody else's pulpit, but I think they should be part of the conversation.
yes, absolutely.
If I may just add, I think it's also easy to see Christ in you and in your behavior. And that, for me, is essential. And I don't always see that in other, I've only been in churches, episcopal representation. But that is essential. And that I've experienced that in some of them, in all of them, have to be done.
Well, I mean, I truly believe that we all do the best we can.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Say that, and all acceptable,
I think
whatever else.
we're allowed to feel resonant, we feel resonant,
Yeah,
and not everyone's gonna feel the same thing.
that's right, exactly.
Even without somebody heading it, to be a part of the community, all to each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think this thing is right? I mean, that this is what you're saying, and that the having the ability to have experiences like this where we get to practice speaking about our faith too, right? And that gives us the opportunity then to maybe do that outside. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's how you can grow.
Mhm.
Not as if
It's
Well,
gonna
we-
be a multi-pronged approach, because some
Yes.
people, like,
Yes.
I find me there is a veil or a boundary between this world and the next.
Mhm.
I'm thinner than other times, depending on the situation, depending on what's going on, depending on what resonates. I've had mystical experiences in the context of hymn. In certain settings. I remember my uncle's funeral many years ago, the Knights of Columbus, who could not carry a tune in a pocket, singing How Great Thou Art. It was the most beautiful version of that. It wasn't opera singers doing it, but it transcended that boundary.
Yes.
Going through my father dying a few years ago in the hospice, that boundary got very thin.
Yes.
And you could see what I call glimpses of the kingdom. I also thought about at that time this idea of like Jesus is the way and take up your cross and follow me. He had to go through that pain of death like Jesus to get to the other side. So, I mean, you can say, if you're trying to get to Riverhead, whether you call it the LIE or 495, it's the way that you get there.
Yeah.
Or if you're heading towards the rising sun, sure, call them, it doesn't matter if it's Yeshua or Jesus or whatever it is. I mean, I don't even know, what did he say? Did he speak in Aramaic?
Yeah, probably spoke, we believe he spoke Aramaic.
In the King James Version. I like it. Those sorts of things. So for some people, the musical ritual can bring that
Yes.
experience,
Yeah.
and that makes experience you're getting, sharing these things with others. So,
Well, this is what I love about the Episcopal Church, right? It does allow us to have that, right? And what I've talked about, and I experienced this for myself, in fact, too. But what I've also talked about other former evangelicals, that people who are part of evangelical churches in the past, or Pentecostal churches, is that one of the things that we are so glad to not have to do anymore is to make the experience happen for ourselves somehow, like that we had to create our own religious experience. That's what my experience of sort of the Pentecostal evangelical mega church kind of thing is all about. Like you have to sort of make your own religious experience.
help them sneak bites you.
Yeah. What?
Does it help them to sneak bites your hand?
Yeah, that's it, right. But what I love about the Episcopal Church is that you don't have to do that, right? I mean, it's the liturgy is a framework and a place where you can just simply inhabit and allow God to show up, and it's okay if you go through it all and there's nothing, that jolts you or some crazy thing like that. Like you feel like you always have to have this sort of like jolt of experience. You don't have to have that. You just allow yourself to be in that frame of the liturgy and be surprised that sometimes, there is, wow, look at that. It's something, right? On this day, that just happened to happen. Those words, for example, that we hear week in and week out, all of a sudden, they meant something different to me today, or they jumped out at me, or I connected with them, even though you might have said that same word, those same set of words, 52 Sundays a year, but in that moment, the Spirit was able to connect with you, and for whatever reason, right? So the liturgy is a wonderful frame that we have within the Episcopal Church, but that doesn't mean that's all, right? I think to your point, Leslie, that there needs to then also be these other experiences in which we have the opportunity to unpack that maybe. I will say that to have the experience that we're having right now, and that the conversation about this is refreshing, because it often doesn't happen within, it's not just St. Stephen's, right? It often doesn't happen in the Episcopal Church. And I think we have just so rich of an experience that we have in our particular way of being Christians, that we sell ourselves short. And we have this tremendous tradition that I hope we aren't trying to sort of like slough off and try to be the most relevant next thing or whatever, because that's going to get us nowhere. Let's dive into who we really are and dive into the tradition that we have, and look at some of those wonderful prayers in the prayer book that come, some of them very old and some of them relatively new, and just like dive into those words sometimes and think of the beauty of that. That we, and the beauty of our tradition, right? Beauty of holiness, sometimes people have called it, right? So both in our rich musical tradition and our liturgical tradition and all of those wonderful things, and yet, to your point, keeping it real, that it can't just be the form, right, or the aesthetic. It has to touch the heart and the spirit in some way as well, right? Anyway, we're really coming towards the end of our time. Oh, Rosetta.
I don't really know how to put it. I really haven't thought it. But, this has nothing to do with any of us feeling negative or whatever towards Mother Lauren or any other. But I think our church has
being so starved or deprived, or I really don't know what word means. And I don't know, I'm not in any way accusing any priest or anything. But I think it's really beautiful to feel and hear everybody in this group. You know, we've only met 3 times, 4 times. And where we all, in different
Community.
ways, feel your special gift to listen to us or respond to us, and we all able to talk about it. And since everybody brings us somehow judgmental, whether it's not by you or by anyone else, we can talk about anything. And I don't think there's any gossip outside after each meeting. Oh, she said this or he said this, you know. And I mean, is there any way for the sizes and for you that we can have like a meeting like this, maybe once every month for 1.5 hours or 2 hours?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we'll still be the
Yeah.
church we are, but
Yeah, I think.
How do we nurture that kind of community?
happen, because I have never heard, you know, because I think as a group, and, you know, I've been, a lot of us in this church, different times, some 5 years, some 10 years, some 15 years. But we really feel like we are here for each other. I mean, it's what I read in Grounded by God, okay? I mean, so it's like, this is actually something we are all experiencing from a lot of reading I've been doing for, you know, trying to get closer to God and trying to be a better Christian. But is this something maybe we can have happen with you? You know, I mean, I know, of course, we have to get permission from diocese, and I mean, I don't know the whole thing of those things.
Well,
The process, I know the process, but I just feel.
I agree with you that there are certain people who have the gift of whatever it is that you seem to have to bring us out. It's not every priest. It's just because some people have that gift and others don't make those priests bad priests. They just have different gifts.
Well, you know, I mean, I think the one thing I notice here is that you all are here and you all are doing it, right?
Imagine, if you will, Father Mark stopped coming to this, but we still met and discussed.
Mhm.
And that's not so impossible if we imagine that 12 people met with Jesus and then he left, and he's God. And they kept it going without Jesus. So could you imagine continuing something without Father Mark? It was great, but it's not quite as great.
I'm not all that great shape. But, you know, I mean, and you know, and I think though that when Mother Lauren comes back, if you all say, you know, we would like to do this, I think that she would welcome that invitation, right? And even if it's just something like you know, it doesn't take a whole lot to do what I just did today, you know. What are some of your questions that you have, you know? And then you all were off to the races, right?
You didn't have to explain the parable of the unjust steward.
Yeah. Well, but sometimes it's just, you know, I don't know either, and that's okay. Why don't we all think about that, right?
And to your point, why can't we just complete whether they've got a reason or not? Yeah. We can still have our questions and bring.
Yeah.
You have to have the community.
But Mother Lauren, I think, would be helpful. I mean, she does probably, I'm sure, know much more about the prayers and the Bible.
It could be convening, just a convener, actually, right? I mean, in that regard, right?
It might help bring her in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we could do God's work. That
Yeah.
pull her back in.
But again, I mean, I want to underscore the fact that most of what we've done has been you all doing it together, right?
It's like, in the Lenten season, I joined for 2 weeks,
Uh-huh.
and they're serious. We start with 7, go down to 5, 3, 1, okay. But you see, I don't want to say this in kind of, it's not a criticism of whether it's Mother Lauren, whether it's, I don't know,
Anybody else, right?
but it's just that, but I have found with our meeting here, it's a pretty consistent.
Yeah.
You know, it's around the same number. And I'm not talking about one shot. And I just feel that our church really has not had this type of, I mean, I'm all for, you know, having meeting but I just feel, I think because of, well, you started the meetings, you have helped us to, I think spiritually, I think we have all gained something from the meeting, which I don't know if we have gained from our mental season or whatever, you know.
We haven't had the leadership.
Well, you know,
The leadership is key.
There is
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, the motto of the student always been, if you want to start, you have to start.
Yeah.
Nobody will do it.
I don't think that's unique to this parish. I want to say, like, I feel the frustration and I feel I think a lot of churches, not just Episcopal, Catholic, every denomination is feeling a sense of, yes, like culture at large is not in, I don't know, like there are problems around the country with parishes drinking, schools closing, people not showing up for Bible studies. So I don't think it's unique to any one parish. And I think we've sort of built a momentum, and if we can keep that going, I think that would be a very positive thing. I don't know that I had a point. I'm sorry.
No,
I
I mean-
wanna point out that,
St. Peter's Parish, and they're facing the same sort of trouble.
right, yeah. And, I remember what I was gonna say, the whole, if you want this to happen, just to do it. That's the mentality, just at multiple times. And there are like people who run prayer groups and Bible studies, and they're not always experts. They didn't go to seminary, but there are books, there are guides, and there's just the shared experience of our own experiences of faith that we can always share.
And I just want to say one thing. Well, one of the things that we do have is Mark's book.
Mhm.
And it's a wonderful book. And I think I would like to say, when shall we meet? Let's make a plan when we leave here. When do we meet again next? And also, I would suggest buy Mark's book, and maybe we could read that even when Mark's gone and bring it to the group, because it has questions at the end of every chapter that ask you to share on your page.
Maybe we should have.
So, Mark, I feel like everybody's favorite.
I think also someone mentioned Grounded in God too. That's a lovely, a wonderful book about discernment, and that I would highly recommend that as well. I mean, thank you, but yes,
I think we need a transitional object. If we can't get you.
yeah,
we
there you
need,
go.
In childhood, a transitional object from the love of the mother to a child learning how to fall asleep alone. Is a bunny or a bear? I mean, it's not someone else's that it's called a transitional object. So if we need your book for the first
Great,
few sessions.
then do it. Absolutely,
It's our bunny.
yeah. Thank you, that's
So
true.
let's go for it.
And let
And
me-
then we can do other books that, we could read every book even, I think.
May I say this, and this is, you know, and I'm from outside, so I don't know anything much about any dynamics or whatever. But I know as a priest, if my people came to me and said, you know, we would really love you to lead us in this, and could we just come and talk to us about this, and just share your faith and we'll share our faith and let's just talk, I think that if I had that experience, I would be so honored to do that, right? And pleased to do it. And so maybe some of it just has to be an invitation.
For me, right after church is the only time.
Yeah.
that I am
Yeah.
busy every single week.
Yeah,
I work.
well, if you're in the momentum.
Well, I do have a question. Anyone here ever say anything like that to other one? Because I know I have.
I.
never said hello.
Yeah, and I sort of did, yes, and, but the time didn't work out and I was handed. Because she was at the time, and I know she was under stress, and whatever she was going on in her life, I had no idea. And it's none of my business. But she made it clear that she had very clear boundaries. And there were times she could do things, sometimes she couldn't, we just didn't.
Well, I mean, I think, we obviously we can't, talk about the past, right? But we can talk about the future and invite some new possibilities, right? And so I think, that yes, if you want traveling home to be your transitional object, thank you.